Today we're counting atoms in chemical formulas. Your I can statement reads, I can determine the number of atoms of each element in a chemical formula. So for your starter, let's read and remember these two vocabulary words. A coefficient. A coefficient is the large number in front of the chemical formula or compound. It indicates how many molecules you have of that substance. So this means I have carbon dioxide 4 times. CO2, 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 CO2. Next, let's look at the subscript. A subscript is the smaller number to the right of the element. This is telling you how many atoms of that element you have. So for oxygen, we have 2 atoms here. But since there's a coefficient, I have to multiply that coefficient times my subscript. So 4 times 2 would give me 8 atoms of oxygen. Then looking at carbon, there is no subscript here, so it's just 1 atom of carbon. So I have to take that coefficient and multiply it by that 1 carbon. So 4 times 1 would give me 4 atoms of carbon. So we're going to calculate the number of oxygen atoms in a chemical equation. So here's our chemical equation here. On the left side of the chemical equation, we call these our reactants. So those are substances that are going to react and produce a product. Our products are on the right. So to remember this, that reactants are on the left and products are on the right, we could use a RAP strategy. So R stands for reactants, A for the arrow, and then P for products. It spells RAP, R-A-P. So let's look at our reactants and let's count how many oxygen atoms we have. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and get my web paint. Okay, so I'm only looking for the number of oxygen atoms. Okay, so here on my reactant side, I'm going to work on my reactant side first. So I have a coefficient in front of this compound. So looking just at my oxygen, I know there's only 1 oxygen atom. So 6 times 1 would give me 6 oxygen atoms here. And then this coefficient times the subscript here of 2, 6 times 2 would give me 12 oxygen atoms here. Okay, then going over to my product side of the equation, I'm only looking at my oxygen atoms. So my subscript here is indicating I have 6. And then I have a coefficient and a subscript. So coefficient times subscript would give me 12 atoms here. Okay, so 12 plus 6 would be 18 atoms here, and then 12 plus 6 here would be 18 atoms there. So 18 atoms of oxygen on my reactants and 18 oxygen atoms on my product side. Okay, we're going to practice counting atoms. So here's our chemical formula or compound above. What we want to do is we want to count how many atoms of each element are present. So the first thing we want to do is look at our capital letters and place our elements in the boxes first. Okay, so my first element, Fe, so if I go on the periodic table, I understand this is iron. So I'm going to drag, I'm going to drag my iron to cover my element here. And then my next capital letter would be an S, so I have sulfur. And then my next capital letter is O for my oxygen element. Now I want to count how many atoms of each element I have. So iron has a subscript of 2. So iron has 2 atoms of oxygen. Okay, and then here with my parentheses, okay, I have to take that subscript outside and multiply it by the subscripts inside. So let's look at sulfur. So sulfur does not have a subscript, so it's just 1 atom of sulfur. So 3 times 1 would give me 3 sulfurs. So I'm going to drag that over here. And then looking at oxygen, I have to take that subscript outside and multiply it by the subscript inside. So 3 times 3 is 9. Oops. Okay, so remember, when you have parentheses, if there's a subscript outside, that subscript only gets multiplied by the subscripts inside the parentheses. That has nothing to do with iron. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, and then I will let you practice on your own. So here, let's look at this chemical formula or compound. Look for your capital letters. So we have hydrogen, sulfur, and oxygen. Now I want to know how many atoms of hydrogen do I have. So looking at hydrogen subscript, I have 2. Looking at sulfur, there is no subscript to the right. There's no small number there, so you only have 1 atom of sulfur, the one that you're looking at. And then looking at oxygen, the subscript is 4. Okay, and I'm just going to choose which one I want to do. So I will choose this one with parentheses. So again, let's name our elements first. I see a capital N for nitrogen. I see a capital H for hydrogen, and then I see a capital S with a lowercase e, so that lowercase e belongs to the S. So going on my periodic table, I would understand that that's selenium. And now I want to count the atoms each. So looking at parentheses, if there's a subscript outside the parentheses, that subscript needs to be multiplied by the subscripts inside the parentheses. So let's start with nitrogen. Nitrogen does not have a subscript here, so there's only 1 atom of nitrogen, so I want to take the subscript outside, 2, and multiply it by that 1 nitrogen. So 2 times 1 would give me 2 nitrogen atoms. Then look at hydrogen. It has a subscript of 4, so take the subscript outside the parentheses and multiply it by the subscript inside. So 2 times 4 would give me 8 hydrogens. And then for selenium, it does not have a subscript, so I only have 1 atom, that 1 atom element that I'm looking at. Okay, now continuing, let's go to counting atoms in chemical equations. So we're going to identify the elements and count the number of atoms on the reactant side and on the product side of the equation. We're going to complete a T-chart to do it together. So here we have a chemical equation. Right where that arrow is, I'm going to draw a T-chart right underneath that arrow, okay? And then I'm only going to look at my reactant side. Remember RAP, R-A-P. R stands for reactant, A for arrow, P for products. So the first thing you want to do is list your elements that you find on your reactant side. So I see a K for potassium, and then I see a Br for bromine. So next, what we're going to do is count the elements for each. So there is a coefficient in front of the K. So I have 2 molecules of potassium. Okay, bromine, however, doesn't have that coefficient in front of it. It's separated by a plus sign. So you're only looking at the subscript of bromine. I have 2 atoms of it. Now going on your product side, you have your coefficient in front of this compound without a plus dividing it. So you have to multiply that coefficient times potassium's subscript, which is 1, to get 2 atoms of potassium. Then the same thing for bromine. You want to take that coefficient and multiply it by its subscript, which is 1, to give you 2 atoms of bromine. Okay? So let's go over here now, and without the writing, we're going to make a T right where that arrow is. Okay, and we're going to look at our reactant side first and then our product side. So first thing you want to do is list your elements left to right. So Na for sodium, S for sulfur, O for oxygen. Then you just simply count your atoms. Subscript for sodium is 2, so you'd have 2 atoms here. Subscript for sulfur is just 1, so you have 1 atom, the one you see. and then oxygen would be 4. Now going on your product side, you do the same thing. Sodium, there's only 1, sulfur, there's only 1, and then oxygen 2. So let's go down here where you're practicing on your own. Okay, there's a periodic table. If you need, I'm going to look for one that I think might be a little more challenging than the rest. I like this one down here. So I'm going to grab my web paint. And first thing we want to do is make a T-chart, right? So these are chemical equations here. So here on this side, these are going to be my reactants. Where the arrow is, I'm going to put an A, and then on the right side are my products. This spells RAP. Reactants, arrow, product. So let's count our atoms on our reactant side of the equation. So I'm going to list my elements first. So I'm looking for capital letters. There's Mg, H, and Cl. Remember, that's a lowercase l with the C. So that's chlorine. And I'm simply going to count. There's no coefficient or subscript for Mg, so it's just one atom. Now, here in this compound, you have a coefficient. So you want to do coefficient times subscript, coefficient times subscript. So 2 times 1 atom of hydrogen gives you 2. Then 2 times 1 atom of Cl gives you 2 Cls. Okay? Going over to your product side, let's do the same thing. So for Mg, I don't see a coefficient or a subscript, so it's just 1 atom. Then chlorine, I see a subscript of 2, so I'm going to put a 2 there. And then hydrogen, I see a subscript of 2. So you're going to work through these and complete this T-charts for each.